Okay, hello and welcome to the first in our series of Successful Grooming with myself, Norma Hedley, and my co-star for the day, this is Larry. The series of videos are aimed at anybody who has anything to do with horses, from the virtual novice who's purchased their horse or pony for the first time, to the person who actually looks after horses for a living. We're going to be going through everything from grooming, through plaiting, trimming, clipping, and finally to show preparation, ready to go off and compete. We're going to start today with grooming. What is it and why do we do it? Grooming is basically the everyday attention to the coat and feet of your horse. The coat, the skin of a horse, is his vital organ, just as his heart and his lungs are. It's the largest organ of the body, so it needs to be looked after. In the wild, you'd see horses scratching each other from the top of the neck along the top of their back, places where they can't actually spin round and reach themselves with their teeth. So they'd stand nose to tail with a companion, and wherever they're itching, they'll move down and encourage their friends to scratch each other. They'll scratch each other. So when we bring horses into a domesticated situation, we have to replace this natural grooming. Stabled horses need our attention every day in order to promote their natural health and prevent disease, keep the coat nice and clean, improve the circulation by massage, which is what we do when we groom. The grooming releases the oil from the skin and brings the coat up into a natural shine. Most good coat condition comes from within. If your horse is healthy inside, if he's eating well and he's wormed regularly and his general digestive system and internal organs are well, it will show itself in his coat. All the amount of grooming that you can do will not give your horse an absolutely wonderful coat if he's not well internally. So it's very important that you worm regularly, that you have their teeth checked, and that you keep particular attention to what's going on the surface of his body. 90% of looking after horses is observation, being able to notice when things are wrong and your horse is unwell. You always know when your horse is healthy. He's the same every day. If you come out in the yard in the morning and the horse is not looking over the stable door waiting for breakfast, then you normally know that something's wrong. So grooming is the ideal time to go over your horse's body and look out for anything that might be developing on the skin or any injuries sustained overnight or whilst out at exercise, and also to pay particular attention to legs and feet and shoes. And finally, it's a little bit of quality time with your horse. Horses are great listeners, and I tend to tell my horses all my troubles when I'm grooming them. We have long conversations and they don't answer back. So it's just a bit of time to spend with them, get to know their characters, and they get to know you. So now we're going to look at the grooming kit itself. With the very kind sponsors that we have for today, Vale Brothers have provided us with a complete array of grooming brushes that are now on the market. Obviously, you don't need to have every single brush that we have here, but you'll need different types of brush for different coats, for different times of the year. Hard brushes for winter coats, softer brushes for summer coats or clipped coats, and the body brushes and various other things, bits and pieces that we will go through. The first piece of kit that you're going to use before you even bring your horse out of the stable is a hoof pick. They're available in all sorts of sizes and shapes and descriptions, but I find that the ones with the bristles on the back are very useful. Not only can you get in with the pick to clear all the debris from the hoof, pick out stones or anything that's been lodged in there overnight. And the brush comes in very handy for just clearing the debris from inside the foot and around the foot. You'll be able to feel whether the clenches are risen, whether the shoe is loose, and whether there are any injuries or mishaps happened through the night with your horse's feet, or again while at exercise. We also have a small hoof cleaning brush, again useful for scrubbing their feet, to use with water or with a hose pipe to remove the mud from the outside of the foot. Just a little bit more bristle than you would have on the hoof pick and a little bit stiffer. So very handy for removing mud and debris from the outside of the foot. The next thing I would use would be a rubber curry comb. Fairly flexible, used in a circular motion on the body. Very useful for removing mud, very useful for removing loose hair, especially when the horse is changing their winter coat into a summer coat. You can really get in there and get all the hair off before you start to use any of the other brushes. We also have a plastic curry comb. If I can get it off without knocking everything over. Very stiff bristle. Again, very useful for removing loose hair. Going through the mane. I would not advise you to use this on the tail. It does pull the hair out if you're not very careful. So only for the body or the mane. Loosening loose hair, removing loose hair, and it can be cleaned out by banging it either on the floor or over a bucket. If you bang it up and down a few times, the hair will all migrate to the top of the bristle, and then you can just pull that off. So now we move on to the dandy brushes. Here we have quite an array of various bristles, starting with the first one up here, which would be a very, very stiff bristled dandy brush with a plastic back moulded to the shape of your hand and the little side plates for grip. It's actually made of black bassine and synthetic goose quills, and it's extremely stiff. It wouldn't be the sort of brush that you'd want to use on something which has a very fine coat or that was very sensitive, but on a native pony or something with quite a thick coat, it's absolutely wonderful. That's the first one. The second one is a more conventional type dandy brush that you see every day. It's a wooden beechwood handle and with a plain bassine bristle. Ideal for removing dust, removing mud. Generally first brush that you would use on your horse. And then we have another type of bristle. This is actually a Mexican whisk bristle made from rice root. Very popular, you see them quite a lot in the tack shops. They should be soaked in water for 24 hours before you actually use them, just to make the bristles a little bit more flexible. Again, the same sort of brush. You'd use the first brush that you would use in your grooming. And then we move on to something a little bit softer. This is a soft PVC bristle, much more springy than the first two. Ideal for finer skins or something which is a little bit more sensitive, or for brushing round the tender areas, say the inside of the elbows or up between the back legs. Be very careful when you clean this type of bristle, because if you put them in hot water which is too hot, they will curl up and go all out of shape. So you have to be a little bit more careful with that one when you're washing it. And then quite a new addition to the market are these super whisker brushes. Very long bristles, very flexible, very good for flicking the dirt out of the coat, and now fitted with an elasticated handle on the back. I used to find when you use these brushes without a handle, because the bristles are so long, that you'd be brushing away and all of a sudden it would just fly out of your hand with the, because of the length of the bristle. So an elasticated strap on the back helps you get a bit more pressure on as you're grooming, and it's very good for flicking light dust off of clipped horses if they don't mind you using this sort of bristle, and very good for removing loose dust and loose hair from thicker coats. And then we move on to the body brushes. Again, various different types of bristle, starting with a fairly stiff bristled body brush. This is a synthetic bristle, quite densely packed bristles, very good for thicker coats, native coats or winter coats. Nice and flicky, nice big back to the brush, and fairly standard body brush. The next one we have is a mixture of synthetic bristle and natural horsehair. Very good for getting a deep shine to the coat. It gets right in to the base of the coat. Very dense bristles, so it will have a very good action on the hair. This would probably be a junior brush. Synthetic bristle, quite stiff, very good for little people to use. Nice and small on the back of the hand. Quite good for ponies, coats, anything that's got blanket clipped or trace clipped that's got quite a lot of winter coat left. You can still get in there nice firm bristles. And then the finishing brushes, we have one here which is a nice classic natural fibre bristle. This is actually horsehair, dyed horsehair, but as you can see, very, very dense bristle, an awful lot of bristle there to cover, so it's a superb brush for a clipped horse or for a final polish on a soft summer coat. Right? You'll be able to get a very nice shine with that one. Again, the soft leather adjustable strap. And this one, which I call a stress reliever. This has got to be the softest bristle brush I've ever come across. It really is very nice to touch. It's actually goat hair. Again with a soft leather strap, and although not really a brush to use to remove any dirt, as a final polishing brush, as we'll see with Larry when we get down to doing a bit of grooming in a minute, it really does bring up a shine. It's lovely, nice and soft. Then onto the two small face brushes. Synthetic one, sort of semi-soft, ideal for getting into the little nooks and crannies around the eyes and the ears and around the face. A lovely shape to hold, because you can just grab a hold of it without scrunching up all the bristles. And another goat hair one, very, very soft, for just finishing off around the face. And then moving on from the brushes, something that you don't see very often these days, but something that I've had in my yard for years and years and years, what we call a strapper. You used to use a straw whisk and make a strapper up with straw, but these days the straw is not the quality it used to be. So we have here a suede leather strapper used for massaging the horse, for banging on the surface of the skin to promote the circulation, to bring the oil to the surface, and to generally tone up the muscle on the horse. Ideally if you're preparing for showing, ideally if you have a horse which is perhaps laid up for any length of time with an injury, and it can't come out of the stable for exercise, you can actually physically exercise him by spending 5 or 10 minutes going over him with this. I'll show you how to use it later. And then we go on to one or two of my own adaptations, if you like. Things that you don't necessarily find in a tack shop, but things which over the years I've found to be very useful and very time saving. The first thing, something which I use all the time, is just a plain and simple vent brush from any chemist or high street store. I never ever put a brush on my horse's tails. I always use a brush, a hair brush like this, which will not drag the hair from the tail. If you use a little bit of coat polish on the tail before you start, and then go through it with this from the ends upwards, you don't pull very, very few hairs from the tail, and consequently your horse will have a lovely thick tail, and you'll get lots of nice comments about it. So often these days you see horses with very wispy tails that have been brushed to the death almost. There's nothing looks nicer than a real good full tail, nicely squared off at the end and in good condition. And then this is actually a dog groomer. It's called a Zoom Groom, an American product, but something which is absolutely wonderful for removing hair, and it's like 20 tiny fingers all getting in there at once. And used again in a circular motion, as is the rubber curry comb, but a lot deeper teeth to it, and the horses really love it. It's a real good in-your-face massage, that one. And this, no, I'm not going to do the washing up. This is a plastic pot scourer. You used to be able to get much bigger versions of these, but they don't seem to be on the market anymore, but they're available in any sort of household store. And they're absolutely wonderful for removing mud. You can really get in there and scrape the mud off without doing the horse any harm. They don't object to them, they don't mind them on their faces or around their legs, and they really do lift up that mud that gets ingrained in the winter. Another little innovation of mine. And finally, my comb. The usual main combs that you see on the market in every sort of tack shop are all very well when it comes to just going through the hair. They're very difficult to get a grip on. They again tend to bounce out of your hands, and if you put your hand around it to hold onto it, you end up with teeth marks in your fingers. So I actually prefer to use a dog comb. I find it drags out all the dead hair from the mane, and it's much easier to use, and you get a much better finish if you're plaiting or doing anything specific with the mane. And also I prefer to use this for pulling. And then we go on to the probably once a week chore, which is definitely a chore for me because it's something that I absolutely loathe doing, and that's the cleaning of the horse's sheath. If you have a stallion or a gelding, and even a mare up between the back legs around the udder, it's an area that has to be cleaned. You get an awful lot of debris, especially with stabled horses on wood chip or peat or paper bedding. They tend to get a lot of debris stuck up inside the sheath. There are a lot of sheath cleaning products on the market, but I have actually found that the best thing is Hibby Scrub, which you can actually get from your vet, and it is a veterinary antiseptic wash which they use for operations. You only need 1 capful in a bucket of water and a pair of rubber gloves and either some toweling or a specially designated sponge for the job, just to get in there and clean out all the debris. It's not a job that most people like doing. The horses don't usually seem to mind it. Some horses do object, but it is a job that has to be done. And finally, down here on the floor, we have a good old hose pipe. During the winter, when horses come in from the field or from exercise and their legs are very muddy, I much prefer to hose them off with quite a high pressure nozzle we've got here. Just the hose pipe is really not enough. You need to blast the mud and the dirt off the legs and also from underneath the feet as well. And you can alter it to create like a shower, which is handy for bathing them. When they come in from the field and they're all muddy, I tend not to brush the mud off, but to wash it off with the hose and not actually put a brush to them. It's something that I do on a regular basis in the winter, and so long as you dry the legs off afterwards with plenty of towels, I don't have any problems with cracked heels or mud fever. I think when you start brushing mud, then you're getting into problems, but with the hose it zaps the mud off the leg and you don't need to touch them with a brush at all. So that's all about the brushes. Now let's get down to the hard work of actually doing it. So we have our horse out of the stable. I have actually already picked his feet out when he came out of the box, but he is actually as he got up this morning. He hasn't been touched at all. Just a word about where to groom. Obviously if the weather's foul, you want to be in the stable or in a designated grooming area, or if the weather's nice and bright as it is today, there's nothing wrong with grooming your horse outside, but just be very cautious that if you do tie up outside, that any exit gates from the yard are securely closed and the horse can't escape and get himself into difficulties. So we pick the feet out in the stable, but I am actually going to show you what to do. So we take the hoof pick, and I always have an old bucket. This is my very old feet picking bucket, which the horses do get used to this. Some horses might just be a little bit allergic. Bye bye, Larry. To this to start with. If you put it on the floor and pick the foot up, and then with the bucket directly underneath, scrape out all that you can get from inside the cleft of the frog there. Always use your hoof pick from heel to toe. Never drag it in that way, because these parts of the foot are very tender and you can do some damage. If you have a horse with a wide web shoe such as this one, you do need to get in underneath all the little edges round there, because that's where the stones or any sort of debris will get lodged. And the other thing when you're picking their feet out is to smell. You will always smell if you've got a thrushy foot or any sort of fungal infection in there, because it will smell absolutely awful, really bad sweaty feet. So brush all the inside of the foot out. Again, as you're doing the feet, just run your fingers round the edge and check that the nails are all alright and the shoe is on quite firm. And you would go round and do exactly the same with all 4 feet. Remove your bucket before you put the horse's foot down, and let it go. So that's picking out feet. Okay. Now, there's 2 main types of grooming. The first one would be old-fashionedly known as quartering. In other words, you do the horse a quarter at a time. Should it be a really cold day, or you've got a horse that is actually clipped and very susceptible to the cold, then instead of just taking the rugs off completely, you would just undo the front of the rugs and fold them back just halfway and leave them on the back end of the horse while you work at the front end. So you'll get all of this side done and the other side done, and then you fold all the rugs back up the front end of the horse and finish the back end. So you don't have the horse completely uncovered and getting cold. But as it's quite a nice day today, we're going to take everything off and go for the whole works, the full Monty. So we're going to start with the rubber currycomb, starting on the left-hand side of the horse with the currycomb in your left hand. You need to learn to groom with both hands. You have to be a little bit ambidextrous. You cannot possibly get enough weight into a brush on the left-hand side of your horse with your brush in the right hand. So you need to learn to use both hands when you're grooming. So on the left-hand side with the rubber currycomb, we're going to start with a circular motion to loosen all the dead hair. As you can see, Larry's in between coats at the moment, so there will be a lot of hair come out, and it will also lift all the dust from the bottom of his coat, so we can then get it off with a dandy brush. So here we go. Starting from the top, nice round circular movements, quite a lot of pressure on your hand, loosen all that hair, all the way round. Down the legs, the same. Stand still, young man. You see the hair start to collect in the brush. If you just give it a tap, and it'll all fall out again. As you can see, Larry thoroughly enjoys a good groom. Much as he's a thoroughbred, nothing he likes better than a good old rub. Just be a little bit more cautious when you get underneath, around their softer skin and the sensitive areas under the tummy. Be careful, don't do it from back here, because if they are going to get you with the back leg, you're in a much better position to get out of the way if you're facing the tail. So just be careful when you're going under here. Same movement all the way around. Yes, I have changed hands under here because it's virtually impossible to do it that way. Pay particular attention to areas such as between the front legs where you can't see but you can feel with your hand. So get underneath there with your fingers and give it all a good scrub. It's all hairy. Again, just be careful when you're going underneath. Not too much pressure. And not too much pressure on the bony bits either. The skin's very close to the bone there. See how this is loosening all the dust from underneath the coat. All the time I'm doing this, I've got pressure on with my fingers here and also with the heel, not just the flat of your hand. You need to just get that bit more pressure there with the fingers. You will notice that I've got my hands on him nearly all the time. You'll feel any indication that anything's going to happen, if he's going to lift a leg to me or anything like that. Straight away, if you're actually touching him, you can take evading action quite quickly. Okay, knock the hair out. You can see the grease on the brush that's loosened off from inside the coat, and this is another reason why you need to wash your brushes about once a week. Get rid of all that, otherwise the next horse you come to, you're going to be transferring that back onto them, and also transferring any sort of contagious diseases or whatever. skin problems and things like that. So always make sure that you give your grooming kit a good wash about once a week, and then you've got no cross-infection. The next thing I'm going to take is this very stiff dandy brush. Although Larry is thoroughbred and he has got quite thin skin, he does like to have a good brush with this. I shall only use it on the bits where he's got winter coat left, not where he's clipped, certainly not on his face and not underneath his belly. You can see that this is almost peeling the hair off. As you go across the coat, it picks out all the dust and all the loose hair and brings all off what you've just worked loose with the rubber curry comb. Down the legs. If you are a short person or you've got very large horses to do and you can't actually reach to get a lot of pressure on up here, this particular area around the kidneys and the top of the quarters would be the most greasy area of the horse. It's nature's protection against the wind and the weather. So you need to get quite a lot of pressure on up here to dig the grease out and flick it out over the top. So it's sometimes easier to stand on a crate. This is the sort of area where you'll get stable stains. Again, depending on the horse, but he doesn't mind me giving him a good scrub here, but this is where you'll find it. So always get in there and loosen it all up, and then we'll get the rest of the dust off with the body brush. So just take the worst of the dust out of your dandy brush before. You can see the grease on my fingers that's come off there. Right. The bit's fallen off. Now I'm going to do with this next, just so you can see this in action. So with the face, just gently, don't go scrubbing it at your horse's faces. They don't like it. They don't mind if you're gentle with them. You see how this brush just flicks all the dirt out? Just one quick flick of the wrist and it's all gone. Boy. So up around the ears, this is where they're going to get sweaty after exercise, where the bridle goes, and you need to get in there and just flick out all the dry sweat and grease that builds up around the ears there. We will actually do his ears with the little face brush. So down the side of the face, and don't forget under the chin, again another place where you get dry sweat from exercise. Make sure you get in there and flick it all out. Always rub your hand over under there, and then you'll feel, again, if there's anything going wrong underneath, any lumps or bumps or sticky patches that have been left from the bridle. Okay, and the same with the other side of the face. Always be careful not to get the bristles into their eyes. You just do it slowly around the face. It takes a little bit of time, but you start rushing it, your horse is going to get upset about it, chuck his head around and not let you near him. So we can go over the whole body with this brush now, just flicking the last of the loose hair and the larger bits of dust off of him. Again, quite a flicky action. once you've got this brush, you can just move the mane over to the other side and get right into the roots underneath the mane. Flick all the dust out from under there. Boy, Larry. So that's the dandy brushing done. If you hang that back up. Before I actually get on to using the body brush, I'm going to put some coat polish in his tail so that I can brush it out in a minute. If you put the coat polish in, let it dry, and then you'll be able to brush the tail through without pulling all the hair out. Just be aware, if you've never done this before with your horse, just take a couple of minutes to get him used to the spray, because some horses don't like the noise. I mean, these are all so used to it, it's second nature to them, but there are horses that don't like it. If you have a problem getting the coat polish into the tail, then you're probably best to squirt some onto your hands, rub it together like that, and then drag it through with your fingers, rather than go for it with the spray. Rather than get yourself hurt, try and get over it that way. So here we go. In at the roots, section a bit off, shake it down a bit, and then through. And then gather in all the tail together. As you can see, Larry's still got the contents of his bed in his tail, but that will come out quite easily. Once that's dry, with the vent brush, that will come out quite quickly. So while that's drying, we're just going to go over him with the body brush and curry comb. A metal curry comb, you can get them in all sorts of sizes and shapes, but this is probably the most popular size. Only for use across the body brush, like this, to take loose hair from the bristles and to remove any grease and dust that's become lodged in the body brush. So what you want to do is get into a rhythm with this. So say 3 strokes or 5 strokes with the brush, and then 1 across the curry comb. So we just start with the face. We'll get the little face brushes out in a minute and have a go with them. Just the thicker hair around the top of the face there. This is quite a stiff body brush, so we'll use something a little bit softer just to finish off his face. Brush down the mane. And then onto the rest of the body. So 3 strokes or 5 strokes with the body brush, once across the curry comb. Try and do this in big circles. That way you get a bit more pressure on there, a little bit more stimulation for the horse. And again, taking this everywhere. as you can see, quite a collection of grease and dust and loose hair in the curry comb. Just tap that out into a bucket. You see you end up with quite a collection by the time you've finished. Alright, so now the coat polish is all dry on the tail, so we can take the vent brush and go through this. So if you grab the hair from the top of the tail and take quite a firm grip of it with your left hand, and then starting from the very end of the tail, start to brush it through. I usually do this over my knee. I don't suppose it's very good practice. It wears your jodhpurs out, but it works. And as you can see, any wood chips that are in the tail, this hasn't been brushed today, this tail, but any wood chips that are in there are literally just falling out, and it's only the coat polish. If you're very careful when you brush the tail, you won't pull very many hairs out at all. If you listen while you're going through it with the brush, you will actually hear them crack if you snap a hair. So if you come across a knot in the tail, then stop, take the brush out, go back to the bottom of the tail and work your way back up again. So sectioning the tail off a little bit at a time, again going through it from the bottom, working your way up to the top. As you can see, the coat polish does save an awful lot of effort and saves an awful lot of tail. Okay, so that's the tail dealt with, and there's one hair in the brush. The point of using a strapper or a banger is to tone up the muscle and build up the muscle, usually along the top line, so the top of the neck, a little bit across the top of the back, not here because this is just pure flesh and organs under there. Anywhere where you've got big solid muscles to tone up. So if you're into showing, or again, as I said earlier, if you've got a horse that can't be exercised and you just want to keep the muscle tone there, then this is a very good way of doing it. Now you must use this in your right hand on the right side of the horse and your left hand on the left side of the horse. And the object is to literally bang the horse with it. So it's a thud and a slide, a thud and a slide, a thud and a slide. And you will actually see the horse twitching his muscles underneath you, which is what you want. There's no good trying to do it quickly like this. You've got to do it slowly with a bang. You don't want to hear a glancing blow like that. You want to hear a definite thud and a swipe. Again, not too much. It doesn't need to be 20 minutes of this. It's a couple of minutes in each area. Down the shoulders, another place where there's lots of muscle. Thud and a swipe. If you watch him, you'll see him start to tense these muscles when he sees me coming with it. You can actually see the grease coming up to the surface there and the shine coming on the coat. And if you could imagine this as a complete summer coat, you can almost see your face in it. It comes up so shiny. Being black as well, it helps. The dark colours will obviously show it a bit more. Bye. Bye, Larry. So we've got the stiffer of the two face brushes, just around the ears with this. And if they'll let you, you can just brush the outside of the ears with it. You do tend to get a lot of greasy build-up on the ears, especially when they're changing their coat. You see like little greasy spots that you get there. And the little face brushes will just flick all that out. And around the eyes. Same around this side. Very gentle. Ooh, sorry. Final finish with this very soft brush. Actually, I think we might be better with the body brush shape rather than this. It does actually bring the shine up, this very soft one. So finish with that. Put these back now. Just get sponge and a brush, a bucket of water, I beg your pardon. A bucket with some warm water in it and just a little bit of the shampoo. And you need a tiny amount. Have one sponge for the eyes and the nose and another sponge for cleaning underneath the dock. So don't get the two mixed up. So taking the bucket with the sponge, we'll do his face first, and then we're not contaminating the water from his dock. Boy. Carefully around the eyes, both eyes, and the nose. And then just damp the mane, turn the sponge over, damp the top of the mane. Good boy. Stop grinding your teeth. You're hungry. Right, and the second sponge, we're going to do the dock. Damp the top of the tail, and then good clean underneath. Good boy. And then finally, just to go over the coat with a finishing brush, I'm actually going to use the two together. So we've got the very, very soft goat hair body brush and a velour cloth which will catch all the rest of the dust. So this will only take a couple of seconds to just flick him over with this, all from head to toe. Just brings up the last bit of shine on the coat. Don't necessarily need to use it on the legs. Okay. Now the penultimate tail bandage. Just to lay the tail and finish it off so that it's all nice and straight. Probably more effective on a pulled tail than a tail that's been left. This is actually a new tail bandage. You have to be very careful if they're extremely stretchy because they do shrink a little bit. So don't soak your tail bandage. Actually put water on the tail. So if you just damp the tail down, that'll just make the hair lay a little bit straighter, a bit more tidy. And then goes pull about 6 or 8 inches through and wrap that around, and then just wrap the bandage all the way around up to the top. So you don't actually need to pull it tight because it's elasticated. It will tighten as you do it, so don't heave it out and pull it tight, otherwise you'll end up losing half your tail. And then down to the end of the dock a couple of times around, and then tie off the strings. There we go. One tail bandaged. And then the last thing before we put him back to bed is to oil his feet or paint his feet. Starting from the near fore, always get into a routine when doing feet, and then the horse knows what's coming next. So you've already brushed out all the dust and debris from inside the foot. So a good brush full of hoof grease or oil. Get in underneath the foot, round all the sole, into the sides of the frog, up underneath the shoe, really packing it in as you go. And don't forget to do round the heels as well. It's just as important as the front of the foot. It's not just there to make it look good, it's there for a purpose as well, to keep the moisture in the foot and put a little bit of condition into the wall. Your horse will get used to a routine. If you're used to going from front to back and then round from back to front feet, then do it that way. But my horses are used to all being dealt with from one side all the time, so they don't object to it. Getting into all the little crevices underneath the shoe at the heel there, around the back of the heel of the foot, all the way around. And then once you put the foot down, you can come round to the front and do the front wall, making sure that you rub it all, especially well, into the coronet, which is the top of the foot there. And that's it, all done. Just to put his rugs back on now, and then he can go back to bed. So, at one point about the rugs, I always put a cotton sheet on my horses underneath their rugs, whatever rugs they're having on. They wear cotton sheets day in, day out. Even when they go out in the field, they have a cotton sheet on underneath their New Zealand rugs. It keeps the coat nice and smooth, stops them from rubbing. If you put a wool blanket next to a horse's coat, it'll tend to get very scuffed up and you lose the shine off it. And the cotton summer sheets can be washed in the washing machine. So if you have 2 or even better 3 for each horse, then you can have one clean one in the wash and one on the horse. And then if you change them once a week, it helps to keep the coat clean in that you're not putting dirty rugs back on the horse day after day after day. So having spent 3/4 of an hour grooming your horse, then put a nice clean summer sheet on it and that will stay clean a bit longer. So that's grooming. In the next video in the series, we're going to cover trimming, pulling manes, trimming ears, trimming whiskers, and pulling manes and tails. So see you soon. Enjoy your horses.